And it's Cymbidium time, one of our favorite times of year when we get all these beautiful arcing flower spikes of the Cymbidiums coming up with these joyous flowers that last for months and months and months. Well, for us it's joyous. For a lot of other people it's a time of horror. They're not able to get their Cymbidiums to flower. In this video we'll just take you through what we've done through the year to make sure that we get those blooms out of these beautiful babies. And welcome to the Nature Company. Today we'll go through some of those repottings that we've done of these Cymbidiums previously in that what I'll call the Darjeeling mix, and we'll go through some of those cultural requirements that the Cymbidiums need to ensure that you're going to get blooms out of them. If this is the kind of information you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, and that notification bell to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. So here's one of our early bloomers. It's mid-autumn here now, mid-fall, and this is one of the warm tolerant Cymbidiums that is flowering. This is Cymbidium Chens Ruby, and it's been hybridized so that it doesn't need that cooling period in order to force the flowering. And this often makes it an earlier flowering than a lot of the other Cymbidiums that need that cool period to force that flowering. Here our coolest period is about mid to late winter, and that's what's going to cause our cool flowering Cymbidiums to flower. And so we only get those flowers basically in spring, although we do get some of the other ones that will flower slightly earlier, especially if our autumn temperatures drop quickly. So what do I mean by a warm tolerant Cymbidium? Well, they're actually called heat tolerant Cymbidiums, HTCs. So if you see that little note HTC on your Cymbidium label, you know it's going to flower even if you don't get those cooler temperatures. And no, it's not THC like some of you might want to believe, but HTC. Don't get the two confused. So these have been bred with more of the tropical Cymbidiums so that they will flower even when it is warm. The cooler ones will only flower if they get a minimum of 10 degrees Celsius for at least 10 to 12 weeks. They do accept much lower temperatures. They'll go almost right down to freezing, but avoiding frost. So if you're getting 5 degrees, 3 degrees, 2 degrees, generally they're fine, but try and avoid frosts. Although some places they do get them frosted, and sometimes even the blooms have been frosted and they still survive as they thaw out. But preferentially, I would say keep them out of frost. So in winter, it's not necessarily the daytime temperatures that need to be low. It's generally your nighttime temperatures. You want to get those nighttime temperatures right down to that 10 degrees or lower, and that will help set those flower spikes. And as I said, it's over a fairly extended period. In some warmer areas, you can actually go through and ice your Cymbidiums in the late evening or early evenings and put that ice on them and allow that to slowly melt, cooling down your orchid. Sometimes that can allow for those flower spikes to be formed even in those warmer areas. But it's not just going to be those temperatures that will make sure that you get those beautiful flowers out of your Cymbidiums. It's also going to be the care that you've taken of your orchid throughout the year. So let's have a look at some of those transplants we had done. I'd link down the video that we did it in, that I'm now calling that Darjeeling mix. It's the potting mix we used with leaf litter. So go check that video out and we'll show you the results. So it's always a good thing to go in and around and inspect your orchids. Just as you know that the Cymbidium season is coming around, you go through checking in and around your Cymbidiums themselves. What you want to do is make sure any of that leaf litter that has fallen down from the trees has been removed. This is going to ensure that you've got maximum air movement through your plant for this period of time, because you don't want any rot setting into those flower spikes as they start coming up. This will also allow for those flower spikes to push their way up more easily without anything in the way. Also, you're going to be removing any areas where things like slugs and snails could be hiding that will eat your flower spikes before you even see them. And Cymbidium flowers produce a honeydew I'll do a close-up here on this to show you the little droplets that they form, and this is very attractive to those slugs and snails, and they'll get in there so quickly and munch away your flowers. So that's one thing that you want to ensure with your Cymbidiums is all year round, is that they have very good aeration. Because they form these large clumps of strappy leaves, you want to make sure that you can get that air all the way through the plant itself and into those pseudobulbs. Because Cymbidiums do like a lot of moisture. They like to be well fed and watered during their growing season, and that way they grow really vigorously. So we need to make sure with all that extra water and things that we're allowing for the air movement as well. And of course, while doing it at this point, if you have any of those old leaf sheaths in and around your Cymbidiums, it can be quite problematic to remove them now. Because if you do start removing them at this point, when they may start already be producing those buds for the flower spikes, you may break them off. So if you have left them on, or if the leaves have died over the growing period and you've left the basal leaf sheath on, then just rather leave it on until your flower spikes are done, because my fingers are big and fat and I will more than likely knock off any of those little flower buds that are starting to pop up. Also, any of these old yellowing leaves from some of the older pseudobulbs, I'll leave on until the flowers start being produced, because I want these plants to photosynthesize as much as possible to make them as strong as possible so that those flowers can grow. And then when the flowers have started to open, then I can go through and cut them off and make the plant look beautiful. So it's just a matter of timing, that sort of thing, to ensure you get your plant looking like how you want it to look. Now, the balance of these Cymbidiums here are majority cool flowering Cymbidiums. They're going to need that colder temperature for them to flower. So as I said, we're going to get that sort of midwinter to late winter, and that's when our temperatures are really going to drop. And so these will only give us flowers in spring. We even have these little miniature forms, and these ones aren't so cold dependent, but with them still being such a small specimen, after having recovered, nearly killing him previously to the repot, and he's now growing some nice, great new growth. So he's not going to flower. He needs to be a bit bigger or more mature for him to flower. And this is a late flowering Cymbidium anyway. So even though he's not dependent on the cold, he is dependent on the number of daylight hours being reduced, and that's what causes his flowering. So we still have to wait a bit for him to grow up, and then of course we'll expect flowering later than what we do from our early flowerers. Okay, now I'll bring you in, have a closer look at the mix and how it's aged over this season of growth and how the plants are doing. So now let's have a look at this media and see how it's holding up. We still see how, whoops, oh, look at all those roots right along the surface. Often when I'm using a bark media, those roots go straight down. But here we have a lot of root growth along the surface of the media, and we see how loose it is still. It's incredibly loose. So light, and that's going to be ideal for them because of how fast their roots grow. And we can see how rich the soil is as these leaves and everything have been decomposing. Also, I was a bit worried with the amount of rain we've had this year. Worried that this media was going to hold too much moisture for too long. Oopsie, there's another root. But it seems like these Cymbidiums have really, really enjoyed being in this media, even with all the rain that we've had this year. And we can see all the new growth that has taken place and filled up. And how fresh and clean all the new growth has been. I haven't been treating these with any fungicides so far, as all our Cattleyas and even some of the Oncidiums have been attacked by fungus, but this seems to have been completely fungus free, and I wonder whether it's got anything to do with the actual media that we planted it in. Perhaps the mycorrhizal fungi and everything in here are doing their job really well and keeping our plants healthy enough to fight off any fungal attacks themselves. So it's all these old leaf sheaths. If you are able to remove them carefully, you can, but I always am a little bit wary that I'm going to break off those flower spikes coming up. You can see all this new growth coming up everywhere. A little miniature. This was one that was really struggling in our previous mix, but it looks like it's coming back to life. Oopsie, we have a little bit of a squishy pseudobulb there, but we'll just have to remove that off. The rest seems fine. We just dig down and we see how loose the media is and how well drained. Even though it's got some nice moisture in it, it's not damp or soggy. So this media has actually worked out really, really well for us. And I don't know if you can see that little shininess there. That's the little honeydew that these Cymbidiums secrete. And that's what the slugs and snails just love. And what the winter cool period is going to do, it's going to start hardening off these younger pseudobulbs here. And they'll mature up. And then that's what's going to cause that flower spike to come. So that's basically the process that they undergo to produce those flower spikes. So to set yourself up for Cymbidium success, it's a matter of looking after your orchid from the time that it stops blooming right the way through until it starts to bloom again. And how are we going to do that? Remember, they are fast, vigorous growers during that growing season. So you want to ensure that you're giving them enough moisture and food so that they can get those big, strong pseudobulbs so that they can then flower nicely for you. They need all that reserve energy so they can push out all these beautiful blooms. And if your Cymbidiums aren't HTC orchids, not THC, HTC, heat tolerant Cymbidiums, then remember you're going to have to give them that cooling period for between 10 to 12 weeks if you're only managing to give them between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius in the evenings during winter. 15 degrees is probably on the higher side. You want to try and keep them lower than that. But if you're able to get them lower down to 2-3 degrees, then perhaps you can shorten that period slightly. And also remember, Cymbidiums like lots of sun so that they can photosynthesize. This is what's going to really give them the energy that they need to keep growing and flowering. And with all this leaf growth that they get, remember they need lots of air movement so that they can stay healthy while avoiding fungal and bacterial diseases. Also remember that repotting at the right time and in the right media is going to be important to get success out of Cymbidiums. And if you need more detailed information on how to get your Cymbidiums to flower, we'll post down the link to our how to get Cymbidiums to flower video in the description box down below. And also there you'll see our Buy Me a Coffee link. Ed posts up a lot of orchid related content, not only with regards to Cymbidiums, and that information is available to everyone. There is a little bit of members gated only content, so don't be shy. Sign up, become a member, and grow like a pro. If this is the kind of information you find interesting, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.